This is my Father's world, and to my listening ear.
Matthew chapter 26. Last Wednesday night we got down through verse 13, where as Mary has anointed Jesus and the disciples that are there, especially Judas, they raised Cain because of the expense of the ointment that they have anointed him with. And we ended with the fact that as Jesus closes his thoughts to them on the matter, he reminds them that because of what she's done, the fact that she anointed him, preparing his body for his burial, that wherever the gospel is preached, she's going to be remembered. And it's going to be done as a memorial to her because of her love that she showed for Jesus. And it's always been kind of interesting to me how that regardless of where you go, preaching and teaching, if they have any Bible knowledge at all, one of the characters that they all know about is Mary. And not Mary's mama, but Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And I take it back to this. God has made sure that she is one of those enduring characters of the Scriptures that if you've heard any Bible, you're going to have her in your mind. Is there any questions or comments before we move forward? No? David, would you listen to a word of prayer, please?
Father in heaven, Father, we're so grateful to be able to assemble once again, Father, and break open the bread of life and learn from him this evening, Father. At this time, we ask that you would be with Brother Mike as he would bring the message that you would have him to teach tonight, Father. Let us be as a sponge and absorb it up and use it in our daily lives and through our families and friends and our co-workers and all that are around us, Father. Father, we ask at this time for you to be with this country in these times of toil. We know that you are always in control, Father, and to help us to do the right things during this time and portray the godly way that you would have us to be. Father, we're so thankful for this country and the freedoms that we do have. And we know that you will protect us and guide us as you see fit. Be with us as we go through the remainder of this week. Be with this church, Father, this community, and throughout the world, Father. Be with it as a whole. We thank you for your love. We thank you for your Son, Jesus, and pray this in his name. Amen.
In verse 14, we're fixing to take and run into Judas again. Now, if you are studying the Gospels in a synoptic way, where you're looking at Matthew, Mark, and Luke all together, up to this point, other than when Judas is called by Jesus, we really and truly do not have a whole lot of information given to us about Judas, other than little bits and pieces, like the passage that we just looked at last week. How that, there when you look at especially like Luke, Luke brings out the fact that, number one, he was carrying the money purse. Number two, he was even stealing from it. And yet here, all of a sudden, we're fixing to see a lot of Judas. We get to see the real man, if you would. Because, up to this point, like I say, you don't have a lot. But what do we know about Judas without looking at the next few verses? What's a few things that we know about Judas? Already told you some. What does he do for the group? Okay, he totes the money back. We know that. What else do we know about it? people that were possessed, they were able to cast them out, but yet they had a small issue there, didn't they? Remember, there was one possessed person that they couldn't cast them out. And why did Jesus tell them they weren't able to do it?
Didn't have enough faith.
Because their own faith was weak at the time. He said the only way that you cast these kind out is with faith and prayer. In other words, get your mind right, and you'd be able to do that. You know, that faith of the mustard seed. So, you know that Judas had miraculous gifts. We know he was the one that carried the purse. We also know that he was one that his mind was not always as pure as it needed to be. And now, from here on out, like I say, the majority of what we have about Judas is fixing to be given to us. And Judas, you know, I really don't know how many times I have had people say, well, I feel sorry for Judas because he didn't have any chance. You know, Jesus told him that he was going to do it, and so he didn't have any choice. He had to do it, and that's not the case at all. Everything that you see about Judas, he was money-oriented. Go back to Paul, when he's talking to Timothy, and he reminds us that, you know, money is the root of all evil. He doesn't say money's bad. He said, but it is the root. In other words, our love for money creates the storm. Well, that's what you see with Judas. His love for money creates a storm in him that takes him to perdition's gate. Yes, sir.
In this very reading that we're getting ready to do, his discussion with the high priest took place
Before Jesus told him. That's right.
So it was already in his mind.
Yes.
He'd already started the plan.
How can I profit? That is Judas's mindset. And I say that because as a people, we need to be careful. There's nothing wrong with making a profit. But I have sit in meetings, not here, thank goodness, because if it was here, I would already have been having lots of conversations. But I have sit in meetings with shepherds, and especially in men's business meetings that had no business meeting anyway, where they sit there and in their discussion, their whole thing was how to make a profit. You know, talk about doing the Lord's work, and they'd say, well, how are we going to benefit? Well, that's the Judas mentality. Our mentality when it comes to the Lord's work needs to be, how is God going to benefit? What are we going to do that makes where God can benefit? You see, there's a difference between Mary and what we're fixing to say about Judas. Mary had this ointment that was worth 300 denarii, Luke tells us, which would have been a middle-class year's wage. And yet her mindset, her heart was in such a place that to her it was money well spent to anoint our Lord and Savior. Judas, on the other hand, and leading the other 11 with him, the 12 as a group, his mindset is, how dare she? Doesn't she know that she could have sold that, and then his pretense was, and give it to the poor? And yet, as Jesus said, don't you know the poor are always going to be here? In other words, you're not thinking correctly. And I want to take this one step farther And of course, again, when you sit back and you look at Judas, Judas was just, and again, the synoptics tells us, he really didn't care about the poor. He didn't, he wanted her to sell it and give it to them. But not so that he could take care of the poor. He wanted that money in that purse where he had hold of it. He could use it for him. And so, that is the reason Jesus comes down on them so hard. And it's interesting there in verse 10 how that Matthew reminds us that when Jesus understood, what does that tell you? Jesus is reading the inside of these people. It's not that they were saying anything. He's reading, and he said, when he understood what their intent was, that's when he steps in. And he says, you're going to leave this woman alone. Because this woman has done this to take care of me. Those poor you're always going to have. Me, I'm on my way out. And so after Jesus hits them, verse 13, and reminds them that because of what she did, this is going to be a memorial to her, and everything, everywhere that the gospel goes, she's going to be talked about. Then in verse 14, then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went unto the chief priests, and said unto them, what will you give me, and I will deliver him unto you? And they covenanted with him for 30 pieces of silver. Like Terry pointed out, this is before they sit down in the upper room. And it's also interesting to understand, especially when you look at John's account, when Jesus lowers the hammer in the upper room about Judas, and Judas being the one that's going to betray him, he does it in such a way that the 11 do not understand what he's saying. He does it in such a way that he allows Judas to basically keep his reputation, I guess. And really, that's not the right. But he doesn't call him out in front of the 11. In fact, John reminds us that when he finally tells Judas, what you do, go and do quickly. The 11 thought, because he carried the bag, Jesus was telling him to go pay for the provisions that they had used for the meal. And yet here, Judas's mindset is, how can I profit? Yes, sir.
Can maybe shed some light on, he's saying that he would betray, show who he is. It's kind of hard for me to believe that the chief priest wouldn't know who Jesus was.
And I would agree, but at the same time, you see several times when they don't recognize him. And I don't know why, unless it's his appearance is changing as he gets older. But now, one of the things that I would say and suggest to you is they might have known him, but they weren't going to the garden to arrest him. But those temple guards are, and they wouldn't have known. And so here you're going to, it's like an eyewitness going with your law enforcement.
I was going to say it'd be like a court setting and.
That's it. And that's what I have always kind of taken from it. And again, that particular, you have to remember when they came and he says, who do you seek? And they said, we're looking for Jesus of Nazareth. Judas has already kissed him. And he said, I'll be. And why are you having such a hard time? Have I not been in the temple with you daily teaching and you never laid in the mouth of two or more witnesses. They actually hire people to come in. And they tell them what to say, and then they say it. So, there's nothing about this lawful. But within this text, you have Judas. He is volunteering. He said, okay, I missed the 300. Let's see what I can get over here. But now, you get 30 pieces of silver. You have now seriously gone over 300 denarii. Because we're talking temple money. Jesse, did you have a...
Yeah, well, wasn't there a servant, and I was just wondering if the servant who had his ear cut off could have been a proxy.
Could have been a huh?
A proxy, instead of the high priest getting up and going out, you had the servant, wasn't it?
Yeah, Malchus, the servant of Malchus, who Peter cut off his ear. I don't know why he's there. The Bible doesn't tell us. Unless he is also a temple guard.
Well, I just kind of wondered if he was like, go do this, the gopher pretty much, and was the person accusing on behalf of the high priest.
Priest? Couldn't tell you. We're not told that. Like I say, I do know that in order to make their trial legal, they had hired false witnesses to come in and bear witness against him. The scriptures do tell us that. So, but this is what Jesus is facing. This is what Jesus has been telling them for 3 years that he was going to face. And so, Judas, again, you see him reacting to what Jesus had told them about Mary, and his reaction is, well, then I'll go see what the high priest will give. Because one thing for sure, he knows who Jesus is. He's been with him 3 years, just like the 11 have. And see, that's one of the things that I don't know, I guess I'm dumb, because I just absolutely, how do you spend 3 years with Jesus and those 11 men, and then able to harden your heart so hard He does by covenants. Going all the way back to Adam and Eve. You be obedient, you get to live in the garden. Everything's going to be taken care of for you. You're going to have a euphoria here on earth. But, the covenant, but, if you eat of that tree, you're going to lose it all, you're going to die. Abraham, I'm going to make a covenant with you. You take and show the sign of circumcision to all your male children, and I'm going to take and make sure that your seed blesses the whole world. I'm going to give you a land that your people will always have, and I'm going to take and bless the ones that bless you, and I'm going to curse the ones that curse you. Now that's an interesting study, that one right there. I'm going to bless the ones that bless you, I'm going to curse the ones that curse you. Coming from the Hebrew, when God makes that statement, the blessings there, you pretty well know what the blessings are. He's going to give you life. He's going to take care of you. But the cursing there is to literally send one to oblivion. Now you think about that. God's, and he uses two words when he talks about the ones who cursed Abraham and his family. That in the Hebrew is a cursing like what we would, if they cuss you out, if they talk evil of you, if they take and try to do bad things to you. But then he changes his Hebrew and he uses another term. I'm going to curse them. I'm going to take them and I'm going to put them into oblivion. That is the punishment, and that's the covenant of God. Here, do you think for 2 seconds that Judas, when he makes a covenant with these priests, that covenant, he hasn't learned from his master? What about the priests who were willing to go into a covenant relationship with Judas?
I think that's where the New King James is so much lighter with that, because it says, and they counted out. So it's almost like an accounting term.
Yeah.
They made a transaction. Where when you think about the other, the covenant, that really brings God into it.
And again, that's, try not to be tacky here. What do you see in modern translations? Now remember, King James was translated in 1611 for a monarch, which means that they used the best scholarship that they had. But as we have the newer translations, what do you see with each translation? In fact, even going from the original King James into the updated versions, what do you see? A dumbing down. And like I say, I'm not trying to be tacky here at all. But as you look at Bible translations, a King James Version is written on a sophomore in college level. In order to sit down and just read through the King James, unless you have that 2 years of college, you're not going to just sit down, read it, and understand it all. Now, you're going to have to sit down and you can understand the King James. But you're going to have to study. Study to show thyself approved unto God. The workman need not be ashamed. I divide the word of truth. God does that for a reason. He wants us to understand. And if I just sit down and just read something, I'm not picking it up. Even in a lesser book. I have to go in, I have to work to understand. Now, our colleges, not even our education system. America used to be one of the most educated countries in the world, and yet our education system has slowly but surely dumbed our children down. We were warned of this in the 50s by educators who were trying to ring the bell. Now, I want you to stop and think about something. Our founding fathers, 1700s. Think about the common man in 1700. In 1772. What do you think about those people, education-wise? Very little education, right? But you know that the majority of the common men spoke several languages. And one of them was Latin. Most of our founding fathers that wrote the Constitution of the United States not only spoke the English language, they also spoke Latin. The majority of them spoke Hebrew and Greek. Most of it was taught at home by mom and dad. Let's get closer to home. Belle Starr, a local girl. Most people know her as a prostitute and an outlaw. She spoke English, she spoke Cherokee, spoke Latin, and she spoke Hebrew. You see, the Latin and the Hebrew were the religious languages. Now, as they have dumbed down our education system, they have also dumbed down our Bibles. The translations, they have slowly but surely, and that's the reason I said I'm not trying to be mean, because some versions were done with a hidden agenda to deceive the people, but not most of them. Most of them were trying to make it easier to read. The education is not as good, so they make it to where it's easier. That's the easy to read version. That was their intent. In fact, the easy to read version actually started as the version for the deaf, because you know what level deaf people read? Huh? 5th grade. People that are deaf, because their English language is lessened, a 5th grade education is about all that a deaf person is able to read and understand. So they wrote those translations in that lesser language. The NIV is written on an 8th grade level. #1 selling translation in the world. But read the intro. They tell you point blank that they made no attempt whatsoever to translate the Bible. They made every attempt to take and translate the thoughts and the intent of the writer. Not God, but the writer. So when we get back and we start looking at what Bible teaches us about God, there's a lot about the covenant. That's the reason why Bob Stephenson drilled into us. Words have meaning. Say what you mean. The Bible uses specific words for a reason. God wanted us to understand that Judas would make this covenant with the Pharisees, he's talking about a relationship. You see, when we believe that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and we're willing to confess Him before men and repent of sins and be baptized for the remission of sin, that baptism, we enter into a covenant relationship with a covenant God. And that covenant binds both parties. It binds God to salvation if the recipient of that covenant is willing to be obedient. Matthew is a Hebrew. That's the reason I say when you're trying to understand each of these writers, as you begin these books, remember those when we introduced Matthew, a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, how we spent a long time just talking about Matthew. Because he was going to be writing to a Hebrew people with a Hebrew mentality in the Hebrew vocabulary. So when he talks about Judas making a covenant with the priest, he's talking about he is moving his relationship away from Jesus and the 11 and joining himself to those who have opposed Jesus, even to the point of planning his murder. Not his death, but his murder. You see, there's a transition here. And yet this is something that has always been inside of Judas, but now it is finally surfaced. He's finally to that point where he's moving forward. And in doing so, he takes and he makes this covenant with them. You give me 30 pieces of silver, and I'm going to deliver to you the one who is the thorn in your side. And we can do it. And so, in verse 16, look at what he says. From that time on, once that covenant was made, from that time on, Judas is looking for any opportunity that he can reach up, grab Judas and say, this is him. Here he is. Right here. Come get him. And of course the problem is Jesus doesn't give him that opportunity until they go to the garden. Now why? Why was it at the garden? Because that's the fullness of time. That's God's time frame, not Judas's, not the high priest. See how all this is working? In fact, you have to remember this whole time, even back at his first miracle there at Cana, when he turned water to wine, when his mama came, he says, don't you know it's not yet my time? And he keeps telling the 11 or the 12 for 3 years, it's not yet my time. It's coming, but it's not yet. And then as the gospel writers would write their accounts, and they would talk about how the Pharisees sought to lay hands on him. But they couldn't. He's gone, or whatever would happen, and then they would turn because it was not yet his time. Well, from this point on, Judas is looking for that time. And of course, like I say, the time frame is left in God's court. That's a little side lesson we need to learn. We make our plans true, but we need to make them in such a way that God is always the one in control. Pray for patience and give it to me right now. Well, it doesn't work that way. We take and we work. Plans to go to South Africa. Me and Rowan learned a long time ago, when you're planning those kind of trips, you plan it very loosely. That's the reason you always pencil it in pencil on the calendar. Because until God sits you down in Cape Town, South Africa, He can always take and erase that date and say, no, I've got something else you need to do first. You know, I was looking to be there in July, to teach the intertestamental period. Well, I'll be lucky if I get to be there next July. But you see, that's, again, that's something we can take from what Judas is doing here. Judas, you know, why couldn't he at this point just say, hey, follow me, I know exactly where he's at. Let me deliver him right now, you give me the third. But see, he couldn't. Because it was not God's time. And so from that point on, he saw an opportunity to betray Jesus. In verse 17, you have the starting of the Passover. Now, so often when we talk about the Passover, we get too narrow. The term Passover is used in three ways. First way, when it talks about the Passover, it talks literally about the sacrifice itself. And then there's some terms when they talk about the Passover, that it's talking about a single meal. And then other times when it talks about the Passover, it's talking about the full feast. And the reason I'm pulling this out for you is because so many times people look at what's fixing to happen and they talk about the Passover meal. If it is, it's a day early. But I would suggest to you that this, while it was a part of the Passover feast, we're not looking at the Passover meal. And one of the reasons I'll give you is when you get back to the book of John, John chapter 18, why would the high priest and them not enter into the court of Pilate? So that they could eat the Passover. And if they went in to this Gentiles' court, then they would have been defiled and they could not partake of the Passover meal. Which is going to happen on Friday morning. Also, historically, we know that the lambs, the Passover, the sacrifice, was not killed until 3 o'clock on Friday afternoon. Now, with that, I also want you to think about something else when we read through this here in a minute. Do you ever read anywhere in this meal that Jesus is fixing to have about them eating lamb? And yet, under the Passover meal, the lamb is the mainstay. You say, well, what about the unleavened bread? Well, for the full Passover, unleavened bread was forbidden. It couldn't even be back door. The what? Yeah, it couldn't even be in the house. The leaven, thank you. Boy, that dude went out the back door. It was not coming back. I kept wanting to say yeast. The leaven could not even be in the house for the full period through the 21st. But when you look at what's happening, now the first day of the feast of the unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus saying, where wilt thou that we prepare thee to eat the Passover? Now again, you can look at 2 Chronicles chapter 30 and look especially like verse 22, and you find out that there is a bunch of different meals that are done during the Passover week. Does he have the Passover meal in mind? You betcha. But why would he have that Passover meal in mind? Because he is the Paschal Lamb. And so everything that the Jews are going to observe on Friday evening, every bit of that shadows what Jesus is going to be doing on Friday morning. And before Jesus gets to that point, he has something that he needs to consecrate to the disciples, to the apostles. And that's what we now commonly call the Lord's Supper. And so as they make this transition, you see the transition, they ask him point blank, where do you want to set up for this? Now, again, you're going to have a lot of visitors coming into Jerusalem. And the Jewish culture, when you have these Jews coming in to celebrate these week-long celebrations, where are they supposed to stay? Now let's go back in our minds a little bit. Think about Jesus as he began sending out his disciples to preach. Remember what he told them when they first sent them out? Not to worry about taking script. Don't worry about taking coats. Don't worry about taking food. Why? Because the Jews are going to take care of you. That is their culture. And so these travelers that are coming into Jerusalem to observe the Passover week, they're going to be taken in by people that live in Jerusalem, the Jews that live there. And that is what the question here is about. It's not for the single night, but where you want to observe this? Where have they been staying? Huh? Bethany. Mary and Martha's. But now they're coming into that Passover week where they, in their mind, we're going to be staying in Jerusalem. Surely. It's the custom. So they ask Jesus, and he tells them, he says, go into the city to such a man and say to him, the master and my time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at thy house with my disciples. Now, there's a couple of things in that statement. What is the first thing that the master says?
Go into the city.
No. The little saying to him, the master saith.
My time is at hand.
My time is at hand. He says you need to tell the homeowner, my time. Jesus says my time's at hand. So one more time, Jesus reminds them, this is it. We're here at this is the end of it. And I'm going to observe the time with my disciples at your house. Now, how are they supposed to know this man? Huh? Okay. John chapter 13. Or Luke. Luke also tells us in Luke 22 that when they walk in, they're going to see this man and he's going to be carrying a pitcher of water. Well, that's not man's work. Now, I'm not talking about our culture. I'm talking about their culture. But that was not man's work. That was something that the women did. Remember the Samaritan woman? Woman at the well. So he said, when you go in the city, you're going to see a strange sight. You're going to see a man. He's going to be coming down the street carrying a pitcher of water. He's the man. And you tell him that the master says when they find him, he immediately, just like it's ready, oh yeah, sure, come on. And he takes them to that upper room, and when they get there, they find that it is fully furnished. He's waiting on Jesus. In fact, some of the commentaries will go so far as to say that he was expecting Jesus. Couldn't argue one way or the other. But I know that the scriptures, there was absolutely nothing backing him up. Come on, it's all ready. Yes, sir.
If he was a good Jew, he wouldn't have turned him down anyway.
Exactly. But the fact that the room was completely prepared. Now, they still had the provisions to find. And again, with John's accounting, when Jesus tells Judas to go, what you're going to do, go do quickly, that is actually what the 11 thought he was talking about. That they had gone and got the food, and evidently they haven't paid for anything, and he was telling Judas to go pay for it. Go take care of the bill. And yet, they make all things ready. They're ready. Now, I'm fixing to run out of time. Yes, sir.
Just one thing. At 16, we're in Thursday during the day. 17. And then 19, we've gone to Friday
Remember,
or Thursday evening.
when the sun sets,
That begins a new day, yeah?
by one calendar,
Jewish.
Jewish calendar,
So this is Thursday before the sun goes down?
then he tells them to go find. They go find and make ready. On that first day,
That would make it Friday.
going in the evening of Thursday, sunset Thursday.
But that is,
Hey, don't even try. In fact, I already thought this. Actually, I need to sit down and do one class on absolutely nothing but the Jewish calendar here, because you have the Roman calendar, same as ours. You got the Jewish calendar that is sunset, but then you also have a Pharisaical calendar and a Sanhedrin calendar. They both observe two different calendars.
but the Jewish calendar observed theirs as an evening and a morning.
Right.
So this is actually Friday evening before Friday morning.
Thursday evening before Friday morning. But yes, you're saying it right. Yes, sir. Help me. He said, no, I'm staying out of it. I've got something else.
I'm interested in Judas agreeing to 30 pieces. Is that a full price for a manslaughter?
From what I have read, yes. And in case you didn't hear him, he was asking, in the culture, is the 30 pieces the full price of a man's slave? And yes, that was if under the law, if a man's servant was injured or killed, if I accidentally injured or killed somebody, then the full payment that I had to pay the owner was either my life or 30 pieces of silver.
I got the impression it was a youth price.
I don't know.
That can't be right.
I don't know. There's been so much made out of the 30 silver in fiction that that's one of those words, the truth of it all. I don't know. And that kind of takes us back to the calendar. How do you rationally? I can't, because they could. Each one of them, they had their different things. What I do know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, from rabbinical history, is at 3 o'clock on Friday, when Jesus gave up the ghost, That was the first wave of 3 where the priests were sacrificing the lambs for the Passover meal that those high priests was wanting to go partake of. Because the killing there was 3, 4, and 5. They had 3 waves at the temple in order to take care of everything. And 3 o'clock is when it started, and 3 o'clock is when Jesus gave up the ghost. Everything about this shadows Exodus chapter 12. And so, as we get ready to stop right there at verse 19, because of my time, and because there will be no place to stop after that for a little while, I want us to think about the preparing. When Jesus told the 12 to go look for a man, and when you find him, he's going to show you a place to prepare. What does that mean for you? What does that mean to you and to me? When we stop and look at our life in this world, what's this life for? We're in a place preparing for another home. Kind of like Abraham. You remember when Abraham was sent off on his journey, the Hebrew writer reminds us that Abraham went willingly because he was looking for a home whose foundations were made without hands. He considered himself to be a sojourner and a pilgrim. That's what this world is to us. You know, Paul over and over reminds us that we are not to even try to be happy in this world. This is not our home. For those in Christ, we have a mansion waiting. It doesn't matter how poor or how rich we are here, it won't even compare to where we're going. And yet, it's kind of like my granddaddy used to say, all I want is inside the gate. If he'll give me a pallet inside the gate, then I'm good. This is a preparing place for prepared people. Now I want you to think in your mind, where does that preparing start? You know, we've been studying for a long time about Jesus and his life. And we need to understand, John reminds us that the gospel was written so that we might believe that Jesus is Christ, the Son of the living God. He says these things were written that you might believe, and believing you might have life. See the preparing there? Just as the 12 went to prepare that room, we are preparing our inner man to enter into a rest whose maker and builder is God himself. And it starts by that belief. And then we're told point blank that once we believe, Matthew 10 tells us that we must confess him before men. Jesus says, if you'll confess me before men, then I'll confess you before the Father. But if you refuse to confess me before men, then I will refuse to confess you before the Father. That means that the gates of heaven are shut to you, that you have another home. And it'll be a place of eternal damnation. So if I am willing to confess and repent at turning around in my life and going back to God instead of going the ways of Satan, and be baptized for remission of sin, Acts 2:38, See, I'm just now starting to prepare. I have just now began to truly study to know God's will. That's the reason I keep trying to remind people that, yeah, King James is hard to read because it is on a high level of education. But considering it has eternal consequences, isn't it worth our effort? And I'm not just the King James, whatever version that you're reading, isn't it worth our effort to prepare our soul so that we can know God's will? See, that's what John is talking about. That if we know, then we can have eternal life. You see, that's what we're here for. We're here prepared for another world. A world where I will never again have to wonder about God. Because He'll be there. I'll be His children. I will be in His presence. If I have prepared you. And that is the reason that when we come together as a group, we always have that time for an invitation. So that we can help those prepare who might have issues that they need to deal with, whether it be the new convert who has never been baptized, and yes, they come to that point where they understand that they are sinners and that without Christ, they're doomed. And they need to take care of that issue by becoming a child of God, by confessing, repenting, and being baptized. But then for us that have already been baptized and are now working feverishly, another one that I like the word, feverishly, to make ourselves ready to be in the presence of God, and we find ourselves short or weak, we have a God who loves us, who has given us a way to commune with Him in prayer, so that our Creator can help us as we walk that walk. And yet, so often we don't take full advantage of what God has